Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Gruver. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I am your co-host, Kathy Gruver.
And I'm Jason Mefford. And today we're back to bring sunshine and light to the world. Da, 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 da. And the way we're doing that today is we have Laurie-Ann Murabito with us. Laurie-Ann, welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here with you guys.
I know, we're so excited to have you.
And one of the fun things about podcasting, right, is you get to reconnect with friends, right? So that's why it's nice. I know you and I had a call last week, and we're like, hey, we should do another podcast together. So here you are.
Here I am, and now I've met Kathy.
And now you've met Kathy. So you met the better half of the podcast, right? So
yeah, Jason.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, we got to get into this, right? So Laurie-Ann, just maybe for the listeners, just kind of let people know what you do, who you are, and then let's kind of jump in it, because you've got a very important message, right, for people that are out there that a lot of people don't realize. You know, they try to go one way in their career or do some of this other stuff, and it's like they're just not even aware of some of the things that they should be doing, and it often holds people back.
Exactly. So I am a reformed, painfully shy girl who accidentally became a professional speaker. That is a story for another time. But I ended up being a speaker in the leadership and corporate engagement. And, you know, through just some iterations of my business, now what I do is I help people leverage speaking opportunities as their best form of marketing, or to help them in their career, because it positions you as an expert, attracts the right people and opportunities to you, and at times it also allows you to monetize your authority.
Uh-huh.
So that's
well, definitely yeah, because unless you actually open your mouth, right, that's why some people write books. Speaking is the same kind of way, right? Because it gets you out there, it shows your authority, it introduces you to people, right? So they can then get to know you better and understand whether or not it's you're somebody that they want to work with.
And typically when you're speaking to an audience of basically qualified leads. Like if you're speaking for your business versus if you're speaking for your career, I mean, you're speaking to people who are interested and are active in your industry. And yet to be seen as somebody, as a thought leader, to share your thought leadership, you know, with a group of people, you know, is definitely going to be a memorable experience, you know, for people to remember, like, oh yeah, I remember what that speaker said. And that just positions you as the expert, like in your industry.
Yeah, it's so interesting because there's so many different ways to go about it, right? So some people, when I decided years ago, so I started out as an actress. So when I started doing all the health stuff that I was doing, and I went to my first conference, I was looking at all these speakers and going, why the hell am I not doing that? Like, that's like so up my alley. And I found myself, I'd have a notebook, and on the right-hand side of the page, I'd take notes on the content. And on the left-hand side of the page, I was writing down how horrible the speaker was or what they did that was good or bad, because I'm watching this and going, well, that was awful. Why did you turn your back to me? I don't want to say, you know. And so I turned to my friend and I said, you know, next year I'm going to be speaking at this conference. And he goes, yeah, you should be. And I thought, oh, crap, I don't know how to do that. I mean, I know how to do that, but I didn't know how to do that. So I was at a different conference, talked to one of the speakers, and I said, you know, I'd love to start doing some speaking. And she goes, well, what's your book about? And I said, no. I want to be a speaker. And she goes, well, you have to have a book. And I thought, well, shit, I don't want to be an author. I want to be a speaker. And, you know, it's also intertwined. And some people start out as a speaker and then write a book from their content. Some people start out as a business person and write a book that leads to speaking. Is there a formula that you found that works, or is it truly just toss the salad and see what rises to the top? I mean,
so now we're going to be talking about tossing the salad
tossing the salad, better than tossing your cookies, which is a whole different problem.
Toss the salad. Well, what are your strong points? If writing is your strong point, then write the book. But if speaking is your strong point, then speak. But for myself, I did write a book. I've written a few books, and I wrote them so that when I I spoke, my audience had something to take away with to deepen the learning. So my books are also like not these, lengthy books. They're modern day parables that are actually just fun to read, because that's kind of what I wanted my audience to walk away with and finish the book. But I did start speaking first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
well, and I kind of did too, because I realized when you put in an application to speak, or if you talk to somebody about doing a keynote, whatever it is, I don't think anybody has ever said, yeah, but what's your book about? It just ended up being this woman's perspective of, you've got to have a book to be a professional speaker. Now, I agree with you. I'm working on my 9th, and 4 of them are specifically written for one of my programs, because I want them to walk away with something at the end of the conference. And I'm about to do a big keynote for an organization. And I said, can I have the table set up in the back? And she goes, you can't bring books. And I said, what do you mean I can't bring books? She says, it is our policy that speakers just cannot bring books, that the audience doesn't want to feel like they're being sold to. And I thought, but I'm not going to stand up there and go, buy this book, buy this book, buy this book. And I was kind of frustrated, because it's like, but I'm doing my keynote on stress reduction, and I have a book that literally outlines what I'm talking about. That is a resource for them. That is not a sales pitch for me. And they wouldn't do it. They just absolutely wouldn't do it. And I said, look, I couldn't mention books. I couldn't have my last slide talking about my books. Now I get to travel light, because I don't have to lug a shit ton of books with me. But I was so frustrated, and I said, look, can I give a couple away? Like, people need to know that there's a resource for after that. And it was just sort of frustrating that I'm not even allowed to mention it. And it's like, how do you, I don't know. That was just me bitching, but
here's how I would have so Kathy, if you were my client, here's what I might have said to you. Yeah. I would have said, you need to read a paragraph from your book, so that you were picking it up and literally reading from it and putting it down, so that now the audience sees it, they hear a part of it. You might even mentioned, like what chapter it was from.
Yeah. Well, and what I said was, can I bring a couple to give away as prizes for somebody that volunteers or someone that asks a question? She goes, oh yeah, you could do that. So I'm going to have them there and just give 1 or 2 away.
Yes.
But just so they know they exist. But I like to read from the paragraph thing.
Because that's a little ninja trick, right? Because again, it's not, I mean, all the things you do when you're speaking, there's subtleties to what you're doing, right?
Yes.
And actually picking the book up, opening it up, reading a paragraph out of it, it lets, like you said, it lets people know that there is another resource there. It's no different than, doing a quote from some other famous person. It's just you're quoting yourself from your book. Right?
As I say in chapter 2, paragraph 4.
And Kathy, like another one would have been like to have your volunteer. I don't know if you had them come up on the stage.
I haven't done the talk yet.
Okay, you haven't done the talk. So I would have whoever volunteers to go back to their seat. Mm-hmm. So that then you can say, oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to give you this copy, so that now you're passing it to the person that's in the front row. Can you pass this back to such and such? That way people are passing it back, and now like all these people are looking at your book.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So I don't typically bring people up first for anything. So I was going to pass it through, because it's a big crowd. So yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting, because we're talking about book speaking, right? And I love what you said, Laurie-Ann, that it's what you're good at, right? Because again, it's like I've written a few books, but there's a lot of people that are like, you need to write another book. And I'm like, I'm a good writer. I like to write, but it takes a fucking long time to write a book. It's like, I am more of a speaker. I'm just going to flip the switch and start recording and talk, right? Because I think that's something too, to where in the professional speaking, profession has learned this the hard way the last 2 years. But everybody always thinks, well, to be a professional speaker, you have to be standing up on a stage in a conference somewhere.
No.
And there are so many other ways of actually speaking. So what are some of the other ways maybe that you talk to people about trying to do?
I also want to just also touch on this whole book thing, the book speaking. The other reason why I say just do what you're good at is because if we say you got to go write the book before you start speaking, just like you said, it takes a lot of time. That's just procrastination. I got to finish and write the perfect book that's going to get me in all the big stages. So I'm just a big fan of just start writing the speech and getting bookings, because nothing will motivate you more or light a fire under your ass than a date on the calendar.
Yep.
For one. And Jason, what was your question for me again?
Well, the fact that, again, when people think professional speaking, they just think about the motivating speakers at conferences and think that's the only venue that they have to actually speak.
So I think speaking now, as a result of the past couple of years, needs to be redefined. There's so many forms of speaking. Speaking is so much more than stages and Zoom. What we're doing right here, right now, this is a form of speaking. When you're doing a sales call with a potential prospect or a meeting planner, you're basically speaking. When you are speaking at a meeting at your company or, an industry meeting, that's speaking.
Yeah.
There's so many different forms. And I think it needs to blend with your personality. Like, for example, a mom of 2 very small kids is not going to jump on an airplane to cross the country to go speak at an industry meeting that she's not going to be potentially getting paid for. But can she just do something like an IG Live to address her audience? And that works for her because 2 little kids, they go to sleep, they take their nap. Hey, I've got 10 minutes. I'll just do like a live and get my message out there. How can you get your message out there? I think is really the bottom line. How are you sharing with people?
Yeah.
It can look different.
Well, and to that point, so there's so much noise, right? If I see one more person going on Instagram and hoping words pop up, to me, that is the most ridiculous thing. And I'm a performer. I'll be goofball all day. And I have friends who they're on TikTok, they spend their day doing TikTok in hopes that it gets them a client. And it's like, but at that point, are you actually a coach or are you a TikTok figure? And it's like, what are you spending your day doing? And I'm seeing clients all day. I don't have time to sit in front of a camera and go, and hoping the bubbles pop in the right spot. I don't get it. So in so much noise with everybody pointing at bubbles and so many people on Instagram and so many people on TikTok and so many outlets now for this sort of thing, how do you stand out in all the noise?
Pick a lane, pick a platform, and just start. I mean, it's only noisy because you think it's noisy. It's only noisy because you also you're worried about like all these other people who have been on the platform for months and years. They're just ahead of you. That's all. We all start somewhere. I started with my first speech. You started with your first speech, but did you worry about it back then? Like, oh my God, I don't have 10 speeches under my belt so that I can join NSA. No, you had to start somewhere. You just went to a meeting, a conference, and said, next year, I'm going to be up there.
And I was too, by the way.
There you congratulations. I like
you.
that. Speaking your life into existence.
Absolutely. If I say it, I'm gonna do my best to make it happen. It doesn't always work. But yeah, I mean, I think there's so many people that you're right. They're like, oh, well, they're so established and they've already done so many things. And how do I, and it's like, how do you, but just starting is one thing, but how do you stand out? How do you stand out on Instagram? How do you stand out if you're submitting your conference proposal to someplace where they've already got 300 other ones? How do you get the attention of the people to become clients or to hire you?
Are you saying something that's making people think differently? That's one way of standing out in a noisy industry, in a noisy crowd. Or are you just saying what everybody else is saying? It's just your version. But like, I think it's just about, just really like digging deep inside and like, what is it that I'm here to share? What's my message? What's my story? Like let's not overlook our story. As a reformed painfully shy girl who couldn't make eye contact with people, like I didn't speak. So I mean, I'm also evidence that you can teach yourself like new tricks. And I learned how to speak in front of people. But to be able to understand that your story is worth sharing and that people want to hear your story, that you don't have to climb Mount Everest in order to have a great story. The more everyday your story is, the more relatable you are to audiences. but your message matters.
Uh-huh.
Are you
Well,
telling your story?
and I think that's an important thing for everybody to realize, because I think, like you said, we see the big motivational platform speakers, people earning, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars a speech. They've got this great story and they climbed Mount Everest and I was a Navy SEAL, or I was a whatever they were, right? Okay. And I was an astronaut, so you need to listen to me because I was an astronaut. But it's the regular people stories that are the ones that I think are really so much more impactful for people, because we can see ourselves in those other people.
Yes.
And the thing is, Laurie-Ann only has Laurie-Ann's story, and it's the only story in the world that's the same way it is, right? And so if you don't share your story, the world will never hear your story, and there's people who need to hear your story.
And nobody can tell my story because it's like my fingerprint.
Yeah.
I was just working with a client who her story is how she went from food stamps to 6 figures. She got laid off from a job and had to decide well, what am I going to do next? I mean, talk about a relatable story. I mean, there's so many people who have either lost their job or they want a new job.
Mm-hmm.
And how she and her unique story about how she did this. Nobody can tell her story.
Yeah.
And stories are so fun, Kathy, Jason, that it's like a hunk of clay that you are just molding and crafting and tweaking a little bit. Speaking for me is like verbal art.
Mm-hmm. There's a crafting to it. And it's when I did my first TEDx talk, I'm very animated in facial expressions, and I know how to take pauses to have people laugh. And this one guy who did also a talk the same day as me, he came up to me and he goes, "How do you do that with your face?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, how do you do that with your face?" And I said, "How do I do what with my face?" He was deadpan. He had no expression. He had no intonation changes. He just did his entire talk with the same face on it. He didn't know how to craft that story. He didn't know how to use his instrument, his body, his face, his voice, to make his talk interesting. And he was dumbfounded at how I did that. And I'm thinking, how do you not know how to move your face? But he just,
was it Botox?
I watched his video and went, oh yeah, no, he's not moving his face at all. But I mean, he seriously had no expression. It was fascinating to me. So remembering that this is an art form.
Yes.
And that we
was
craft.
He monotone?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, and it was so boring. And he had really interesting things to share, but he wasn't using his instrument. He wasn't looking at this as a creative form of art. So I'm so glad you pointed that out, because it's an art form. Speaking, storytelling, all of that it's you are the instrument and you are creating this journey to take people on. So I love that you equated it to that.
And that's exactly is that we take our audience on a journey, to use like the amusement park, it's the roller coaster. We take them up, we bring them down, but we bring them right back home at the very end. But yeah, it's a ride. Like come and we invite the audience into our story, into our speech. But yeah, it's an art form, like being really good on the platform. I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm always like, my next speech will be better, because I'm always learning from what did I do this time? What would I do differently? And I think that's how I started from the very beginning. And my very first speech, the one that I said yes to when I was just like, what the hell am I saying yes to? I don't speak. And I can tell you guys this because I started teaching. I went into that college professor mode and just spoke for 15 minutes. No intro to my speech whatsoever. And this is how I brought it to an end. Okay, now I'm done. That was
Bye.
That was what I said to the audience. Now I'm done. I mean, looking back at it, I'm just like, oh, how princess-like. I'm done speaking. You can, if you want to talk to me more, I'll be in the back of the room. All I was doing was I was trying to get away from all these eyes that were on me.
Oh God.
And in the back of the room, people came up to me and said, so do you work with clients? Do you have a website you could share with us? And I was like, what? Why? And that's where I realized that speaking was the fastest way to grow my business.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, and it's interesting because even like that, you said, I mean, there was really no clothes, there was no anything else, but it's still whatever it was about you was attracting those people to you.
Yes.
Right. Even though it wasn't, a polished speech, it doesn't matter. You just showed up and you did the best that you could at that time. And again, because I was a shy kid, I'm still an introvert. People wouldn't know it because I pretend, right? I play. I have fun with it. I use my voice differently, right?
What?
Yes.
What? Right. But it's things that I've practiced and I've played with, right? Because I think, again, so much of the time, especially, some of the people out there are probably like, oh, I'm shy. Oh, I'm not funny. Well, I don't necessarily think of myself as a funny person, but every so often people are like, you're really funny. And I'm thinking, okay, right? Okay. To some people, I guess I'm funny. To other people, I'm stupid, probably, but it doesn't really matter, right? Because as I'm sharing and just being myself and overacting sometimes, right? That was one of my favorite Jim Carrey outtakes, and I think it was Liar Liar. He was going off on one of his things, and the other actress was like, "You're overacting. Objection! You're overacting." Right? It was in the outtakes anyway. But just you can do that. You can play with it. You can have fun with it, because at the end of the day, the more unique you are, the more you're saying something different, the more you're just being yourself. It's gonna draw people. Even like what you did. Okay, I'm done.
And scene.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's just about like getting out there and doing it. I mean, you're an introvert. Kathy, what would you consider yourself? Are you an introvert?
I am such a high extrovert. Oh my God.
Okay.
I am so jazzed by people, and actress since I was 5. And
And I would say that I was probably originally more the introvert, but I know when to step into being the extrovert. When I'm in front of people, when I'm at networking events, when I'm at conferences, because if they're hiring me to speak, it's part of my job to engage with the audience before, during, and after. So I've just taught myself, like, who do I have to be?
Yep.
Like, what is a speaker? What do speakers do? Like, I just step into my speaker role.
Well, and we talk all the time about, when I coach, I do a lot of work with ego states, the inner family systems. And we all have an extrovert part. We all have an entertaining, outgoing part. It might not get a lot of attention. It might be hiding in the back, but you have the ability to tap into that part of you. Just like if I'm talking to a low energy, shy introvert, I'm not going at them with my full, they're going to be like, force field, I'm going to scare the shit out of them. So I bring my voice down, I bring my tone down, I talk a little slower, I'm a little less intonation-y in my language, and I meet them where they are. I can't expect them to extrovert up to me. I got to bring out my inner calm down person a little bit and talk to them on a different level, and we all have the ability to tap into those different parts of ourselves. So I love that you described it that way. It's like, you have that inner part of you that can do that. You just have to kind of call it up.
So tap into it and raise your hand for these opportunities. These opportunities are all over the place. You're attending meetings and conferences all the time. Like, just look at the places that you have memberships. They have to find speakers.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, like, just ask them, like, what's your process for hiring and booking speakers?
Yeah.
And
simple
they'll
question.
share it with you. Yeah, you're not saying, hey, I should be the speaker at next month's meeting. You're saying, what's the process for hiring or booking speakers? I just look at it as like, we're opening the door to the conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's about the ask, right? If you don't ask, then you're never going to get to do anything. And I think that first step is so hard for people. So for someone who, and I know you coach people to do speaking to, to bring more income and accentuate their business, how do they take that first step? How do you encourage them to open the door and do that?
I do tell people, pull out a piece of paper and make a list of all the places that you have memberships to, different conferences that you already attend, networking groups that you might attend. Who do you know that has a podcast? Maybe you want to start your own podcast. Maybe you just want to be a guest on podcasts or live stream shows. I mean, just make the list and then just ask. Find out who's in charge. If it's an association, a chamber, and you can't figure out who's in charge of hiring people, who's a program director, just send an email or ask the president, who's the right person that I should be talking to. Just make one ask, see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, that's an important thing, because if you don't ask, the answer is no.
Right, exactly.
And so you have a 0% chance of getting what you want. All you have to do is open your mouth and ask, and you go from 0% to 50%. Because the answer is either yes or no, right? And I'd much rather take a 50-50 bet than a 0 bet, right? Yes. But it just requires you to, the worst thing that they're going to say is no, which is what they've already said if you don't ask the question.
Right. That's a very complicated math problem that I'm going to have to write down.
Is that X to the second?
No, wait, there's a train in Baltimore. Okay.
Traveling at 60 miles an hour.
No, I still have nightmares about that. But it's true. It's true. It is the ask. And you're right. If you don't ask the question, then it's always no, right? What is it? There's no bad decision except the one that isn't made, or something to that. I just butchered that quote, but something to that effect of actually stepping out and making the ask. How do you know what to ask for?
What do you mean? How do I know? How
does one know what to ask for?
Well, I'm talking about let's open the door to the conversation. And to find out here's our process, because what they might tell you is we start planning our conference, 12 months in advance. So the conference that we're already advertising, that's in 4 months, that's already booked. Mm-hmm. That's the information that you want to know. It's oh, okay. So when do you start planning next year's? Okay. So that's when I'll reach out to you when you're going to start looking for speakers. And your topic may or may not fit in with the theme of that conference. No big deal. Same thing with smaller monthly associations. They're constantly looking for speakers, but your topic may fit in at a particular time. Mm-hmm. But again, we just have to open the door and just what's your process? What do you need and when? And then provide that information for them and let them know hey, well, here's a couple of topics that I speak on. Do you think that would be of interest to the members, to your audience? Again, it's not about hey, you should hire me because I'm wonderful. It's more about you're making it about the meeting planner and their association, their conference.
Sure. And to that point, also keeping in mind, if they say no, that is not a personal rejection against you. That is your topic doesn't fit in, or we've hired them all for the next 2 years, or we only go from inside. Because I've had that happen where, big companies have contacted me to do something and I submit all my stuff and they're like, this is so great. Unfortunately, our bosses just let us know we have to have somebody internal do the talk. Well, that's not a personal rejection to me. That's their protocol, and I think we take rejection so personally. And coming from an acting background, good Lord, I had to learn about rejection really early. Most of it is no. I mean, it's not no against me. It's no for that thing. And I think if we can shift that into remembering it's not a personal affront against us, then we're going to take more chances, take more risks, ask for more things if we're not afraid to hear no.
Yes. And I'll also add that if you live near a big city where there is a lot of convention centers, they have calendars about who's coming. Mm-hmm. Reach out to those people. Chances are, if they're already on the calendar of the convention center, they've already got all their speakers, but you never know. But there's a lot of reasons why speakers can't show up. Some sort of an emergency. I live in the New England area, so weather's a factor for half of the year, but you just never know. And you can let people know, I'm a local speaker. Here's what I speak on. If you find yourself in a pinch, I happen to be around that particular weekend, that week.
Yeah, that's a great idea, especially with COVID, because you never know when you're going to wake up and go, oh shit, I just tested positive. I can't fly from, or I can't drive, I can't show up to do that thing. That's a very good idea to put yourself on that sort of like backup, I'll save your butt list. That's a good idea.
I have gotten calls.
Mm.
I remember one particular time I was introduced to him. He's like, yep, I got a conference coming up in April and I got all my speakers. Next question was, when do you start planning for next year? He said, November. I said, fantastic. I'll reach out to you in November. He called me 2 weeks later saying somebody had to back out. And my topic fit in perfectly with the slot that they had. So, and that led to a lot of other business. So in my opinion, speaking's the gift that keeps on giving.
I agree. That's so great. And of course, we're out of time. The blatant hand gesture of we're out of time. So this is so great. Jason, any final thoughts for you? And then we'll ask Laurie-Ann where to reach her.
No, I think it's just great. And you know, the whole idea of, you know, just kind of reimagining what speaking actually is, and realize that we're all speaking all the time anyway, right? And so, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're shy, introverted, extroverted, doesn't matter, you know, but we can ask questions, we can play with things, we can try stuff out and just make it fun, right? I mean, because like we said with the question, the worst thing is people are going to say no, right? So not that big a deal. And, you know, you try something, hey, what's the worst that could happen? People don't like it, but the best, they might love it, right? I know some of the stupid antic things that I did have done, right? Like I wore a t-shirt underneath my shirt and I started to do like a little strip tease thing where I like opened it. It was a superhero themed conference, right? So I was kind of doing like the Superman thing on stage. Pictures, you know, people were pulling their phones out. This was so great, you know. Will I ever do it again? I don't know. But it was just one of those fun, kind of crazy things to put in there and do things to make it a little bit more fun, because most of the time, honestly, most of the speaking things you go to are boring. Yeah. Right. So even if you can, you know, crack a joke, do something that's just kind of you, right? And just help people get to know you as a person better, your quirks, your weirdness, everything else too. And like you said, speaking is the gift that keeps on giving. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This has been so fun. Okay, Laurie-Ann, how can people reach you if they want to work with you? Website, Instagram, handles, all those good things.
Sure. My website is speakandstandout.com. I also have a podcast called Be in Demand with Laurie-Ann. And you can find me over on Instagram at Laurie-Ann.Murabito. And I also hang out on LinkedIn a lot as well.
Yeah, this has been amazing. Yay. Everyone go visit Laurie-Ann's website. Check her out. You can watch her pointing at bubbles on Instagram. No, probably not. I'm going to go look and see if you do that. My name is Kathy Gruver. I can be reached at kathygruver.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, have a great week, start speaking more. See you on the next episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. See ya.